The Sine Institute of Policy and Politics is American University's incubator for policy innovation. We convene leaders in the academic, public, private, nonprofit, and journalism sectors to engage and promote common ground and nonpartisan solutions. In an evolving world, we seize the opportunity to work on the nation's most pressing challenges through collaboration by experts and top scholars in their field with students in research and scholarship. As part of that goal, the Sine Institute leverages American University's location in our nation's capital, the nexus of government and a growing international business center. We connect diverse perspectives from around the country and around the world with our world-class academics and research, experienced practitioners, and the most politically active student body in the U.S. We stand apart through our focus on the role of business and the nonprofit community in public policy, the rise of the importance of economic regions in the United States, and international policy issues. Our focus is to make an immediate impact at the intersection of policy and politics that leads to real and lasting change. Thank you for joining us as we convene, communicate, and collaborate. Welcome to Reimagining America, Transforming Our Cities, with distinguished lecturer, Mayor Francis Suarez. Hello, everyone. We are so excited that you're joining us. I'm so sorry for some technical difficulties we had at the beginning. We certainly want to get going with this conversation. We're very excited today to have with us our distinguished lecturer, 2021 for the Sine Institute, Mayor Francis Suarez. I want to start out by certainly thanking the Metropolitan Policy Center, who's a co-sponsor today. It was created in the fall of 2014 with the School of Public Affairs at American University. And it also serves as a metropolitan and urban research hub on AU's campus and really focuses on creating knowledge that addresses our 21st century metropolitan and urban challenges. And we want to thank them and their executive director, Derek Hyra, for helping us co-sponsor this event today. Mr. Mayor, I am so excited that you're with us. I'm just going to briefly, there's so much to talk about your long service career, but you are the 33rd mayor of Miami, the first Miami-born mayor, I might add, and certainly wasn't elected with an incredible mandate. You've championed the integration of climate adaptive technologies, building practices and economic policies across all facets of government as part of the Miami's Forever plan. We are just honored to have you with us. I would like to say that with all great leaders, they have great teams. So the Sine Institute team wants to give a quick shout out to Otto and Addie and Soledad and Jeremy and others who helped us pull this together today. But I want to get right into this. I have to say, Mr. Mayor, I'm sure when you were sworn in, nobody told you that you would be serving in a year where there was a global pandemic, a financial crisis, social unrest. What is the past year during the COVID-19 pandemic been like so challenging for our communities? Can you tell us a little what it's like to lead a major U.S. city during this time?
Oh, it's been extremely challenging. It's certainly something that tests you at your core. It makes you focus on your values and your decision making and judgment. And it's there is no handbook for being a mayor, and there certainly isn't a handbook for being a mayor under the adversity that most American mayors were under throughout this year. So it was a very difficult year, but the city I thought managed itself very well. And I think has come out of and is coming out of the pandemic extremely, in a strong fashion.
Yes, it's incredible. Are there an array of city plans to help promote economic recovery? We are starting to open up. Are you feeling this in the community? Are people ready to, open up the doors, get back to school, get back to work in so many places?
We are, and I think, it's fair to say that as a city and as a state, we're probably one of the cities and states that opened up earlier than others. And I think we also did things throughout the pandemic to try to help small businesses in particular thrive throughout the pandemic. For example, we allowed outdoor seating expansion into parking lots and, for small businesses and restaurants that had a hard time surviving the pandemic. And then we were fast at deploying federal funds, including now American Rescue Plan dollars that are going to come our way.
Well, it's interesting. I'm curious. You brought this up, the federal government. What are the challenges or some of the opportunities when you have the impact of the U.S. government system? I mean, here you are, the mayor of the city. You also have to work with state government and national government. How did you navigate all of that as things were happening real time and changing every day?
It was difficult,
Yeah.
and you have to understand that we're living unfortunately, in a very partisan world where a lot of these issues were very partisan. And I think, and in the context of a presidential election, so it was hard to deal with, federal government that changed hands in the midst of it,
Yeah.
changed parties in the midst of it, dealing with a state which is not monolithic, right? It's a state that has extremely different cities and population centers, Miami being probably the densest of all of them in
Mhm.
Florida, which would require, I think, a different sort of approach and sense of policies. So it was complex, without a doubt, navigating all those different political, landmines.
And how do you find yourself able to do that? Do you build partnerships with certainly, you have to have long term partnerships too. Was there also with other mayors, other peers that you had to kind of navigate this with? This is uncharted territory in a lot of respects for some of this. So
Absolutely, yeah. We activated the Miami-Dade League of Cities. So we were able to talk among mayors throughout Miami-Dade County. Obviously, as the vice president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, at the time the second vice president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, certainly activating the Conference of Mayors and talking to mayors across America was incredibly important to make sure that we were utilizing best practices, and that we were talking with other mayors to get a sense of what they were thinking. And then, of course, having cooperation and collaboration with the state and county was incredibly important, maintaining open lines of communication.
yeah, absolutely. It's interesting, Mayor Suarez. I have a new appreciation and understanding as somebody who's even worked in politics for so long about what my local government, matters. And it's interesting how, whether it was local news or getting updates from one of your colleagues, Muriel Bowser, who is an AU alum, but also like I went to her office and looked for. Do you find that there's an appreciation with the electorate and certainly the people you represent, that this need to be engaged with local government on a lot of these issues?
I think there is, and I agree with you. I think that appreciation has grown, particularly throughout the pandemic. I think with 24-hour news cycles now, a lot of mayors end up taking on a national profile. So
Yes.
they're more well known and more well recognized throughout the country. I think, people maybe don't fully understand all the powers that a mayor has, particularly during an emergency declaration. I think that's something that was the subject of tremendous debate in terms of what our liberties and our freedoms are in moments of emergency. And I think it will hopefully evoke a broader conversation, a longer conversation about how we manage pandemics going forward. I think you know there's a lot of takeaways, a lot of things that we probably could do better, and a lot of things that we maybe should have done. And so I think there's going to have to be a time, once a pandemic is over, and hopefully another one doesn't start, for us to reflect, just like we do with hurricanes, for example.
Right.
Down here, we become one of the most wind resilient cities on the planet because we've made changes based on events that have occurred.
Well, it's interesting. You were on a very, really interesting path, certainly for Miami, about bringing in new industry, technology. We'll do a separate conversation sometimes, Mayor. You can explain Bitcoin to me because I know that you're becoming quite the expert. But you're looking to see Miami become one of these, tech cities, not unlike Silicon Valley. And I'm wondering, what were those plans, and has the events of the last year slowed that down, or how are you looking at continuing that innovation?
There's no doubt that the events of the last year have accelerated it enormously, because the fact that we were open, and the fact that that remote work became a real phenomenon, where it went from something that maybe 5% of the population did to something that 90% of the population did. It untethered people from their physical location, so people could then work where they wanted to be, as opposed to where they felt like they had to be. So, for example, a lot of people who had left Miami, who had family in Miami, when they were in college because they couldn't get jobs that were high paying enough, came back And when they came back here, they realized this was a completely different city. This is a city that had been transformed, that was far denser in terms of technological talent, venture capital talent, et cetera. And so I think that created a watershed moment for our city. And of course, the fact that I rolled out the red carpet while a lot of other cities across America were pushing away industry, I think that had a dramatic effect. The "how can I help" tweet, in terms of inviting people to come to Miami and set up a business in Miami and make it what I call the capital of capital.
Mm-hmm.
I think that certainly was a counter narrative to what was happening in other cities across America. So it'll be interesting to see how things unfold over the next 6 months to a year.
Well, it's interesting because the city was evolving, and as a mayor, so often it's so important with economic development to think of new solutions, new ideas. But I have to ask you, can you have economic development and economic equality exist at the same time? Like, how do you balance trying to, bring in new industries and be forward thinking, but also take care of, the population now and their needs now?
It's always very difficult. I mean, it's funny. I was doing an editorial board interview, and I was saying that the editorial board will often highlight that Miami, like every urban city in America, has an issue with income inequality. And then when you're bringing in high-paying jobs, and then they criticize you're creating gentrification. So it's like, well, wait a second. If you're saying we have income inequality, right? The solution to that presumably is to create higher paying jobs, right? And then if you start creating higher paying jobs, then you criticize that by saying you're creating gentrification. So it's very, very complex, and I think it's very comprehensive in terms of what solutions are for cities. And I think the best thing that you can do as government, understanding that government doesn't create these problems and government can't always solve these problems. What government can do is try to work on these problems with the private sector and with society in general. And I think what we've tried to do is first create the jobs that would allow people to come out of poverty, would allow people to not have to necessarily need an affordable housing unit, et cetera. And the second part is we want to make sure that at all levels, from young children to college students to young adults to the elderly, they have a way to interact with this new technological and finance industry that is coming to our city. And so we've done it through broadband initiatives, coding programs in our high schools and inner city high schools. We've done it through a child savings account for kindergartners to create financial literacy and help with financial literacy. We've done it by helping our university systems, which was just ranked one of our university systems, the #1 public university in the state of Florida, FIU, my alma mater.
Yeah.
So we are continuing to do everything that we can to help young adults upskill, and then the elderly understand why it's important for us to differentiate our economy and create an economy of the future, so that we're more resilient to economic shocks, and so that our children don't have to leave.
It's really interesting because that focus on the long-term investments as well. I mean, this was not only something where you saw economic challenges with jobs and whatnot, the school system and remote learning and balancing teachers' needs and students' needs. It really is the long-term, short-term kind of coming together. Education, how did that come into play? And you had to bring a lot of people, I'm sure, to the table to decide what was right for all the different players in the education system, while thinking what impact is this going to have long term?
Yeah, I mean, COVID without a doubt created a huge challenge for the education system and for the digital divide. Thankfully and luckily, before COVID, our school superintendent and our school board had authorized a program that would allow every single student in the public school system to have a digital tool. And so we combined that with a program called Miami Connected that was a philanthropic donation from Ken Griffin from Citadel, who gave us $5 million to connect every single student on free and reduced lunch with free broadband internet for 2 years. So we want to create access. We want to make sure they have the tools. And then we want to make sure that they have the right curriculum to be able to succeed in a modern day economy. We only have two choices as any city in America. This is not a Miami issue. We only have two choices. We can embrace the reality of technologies here and it's going to become a greater part of our world, or we can reject it to our detriment. It's that simple.
Well, it's interesting because you also mention that you have to bring business to the table. I'm sure there's nonprofit organizations that have to. How do you make sure that you're hearing different voices? And public service is so important, but government's a part of the solution. A lot of times we talk about Sine, it's everybody sitting at that table to figure that out. How have you navigated that, as well as Mayor bringing different voices in to come and find solutions?
It's a challenging issue. I think technology like the one we're using right now makes it easier because you can talk to multiple, hundreds of people, thousands of people, tens of people, dozens of people at any given moment. So I think that is extremely helpful. But it's challenging because you also want to move fast and be adaptable. So and you want to make decisions. So it's hard sometimes. A good process, which is important, overwhelms the timing that a decision needs to be made on, and understanding that those decisions have broad and serious ramifications.
Well, it's interesting because I think one of the things that, and especially it's been called out that Miami was in the process of doing this, is that your ability to weather the pandemic is a result of years of effort to become more widely embracing data and city government, for example. I think, when you think about making city services available digitally, establishing and grew existing partnerships with business, how important is it to make sure that you're a data driven, especially during this pandemic, but then also to grow moving forward?
Well, I think sometimes people fail to realize how big government is. We're a big business. We're $1 billion company with 4,500 employees and 4 labor unions. And, before I arrived, we were still getting paper plans. So the first thing I did was I created something called e-plan. So from the moment that I got elected thereafter, people could submit for plans, from a roof to windows to building a home electronically, thereby creating an electronic trail that we could audit, that we could determine whether there were, glitches in the system, or whether there was enough personnel, and a variety of different things. From there, I realized that you couldn't start a business in Miami without going to a physical location, paying a fee, which was a very high fee. And of the 3 governments you had to interact with to start a business, the state government to open a corporation and the federal government to get a tax ID number, we were the slowest and the most expensive. And so, I decided to do something called eStart, right, where you could start a business electronically from your home or from your mobile device. And then during the pandemic, when we were, essentially virtual, I realized, wait a second, we could take this to the logical extreme and be a completely virtual organization where, a resident never has to come into a building to interact with government to get something done. There's no need for it. And so we're now in the process of creating something we call eGov, where our residents will be able to interact with our government without ever having to leave the home. And I think that's important because not only does that give us a ton of data, not only are we digitizing ourselves to better understand our decisions, and obviously, the next generation of our artificial intelligence will be comprehending what the data means, right? And giving us suggestions on how we can better serve our residents. And I think you'll start seeing those solutions in eGov really soon. I'd say in the next 2 years. And you'll have computers that will be able to analyze all your data and tell you, look, you need 3 more employees in this department if you want to get down to, this much response time. You have an issue with this particular employee because there's a bottleneck here. It can really, really get. And the beauty of that is that it's objective. So it takes out the person's skin color, the person's gender, the person's sexual orientation. It's not about any of that stuff. It's an objective criteria that a machine is looking at to say, hey, there's a problem here.
Well, it's interesting because I imagine that the one tool and asset that you also have is to get feedback from your citizens. And during the pandemic, it was difficult sometimes for you to go out into the community. So did this accessibility online, how were you able to get feedback about if people felt like they were getting the information they needed? How do you have that conversation when you're not out doing some of that retail conversations that public servants have to do, whether it's in the diner or going around in community groups?
I think social media helped a lot. These were forums where we could give information and share information and listen in some respects, but the more
sort of broad feedback, I would get it from social media. And I will say that the ones who probably suffered the most were the elderly in our community, because the elderly typically congregate, which they weren't able to do. And we typically spend a lot of time with them because, they're the most vulnerable in our society. And frankly, they're also some of the most engaged citizens that we have.
Yeah.
So it was very, very difficult for them. Now, when I go back and see some of them, they're like, "Hey, where have you been?" And I'm like, I didn't want to get you sick. I was literally the second person that got sick in Dade County, or at least that was determined to have gotten COVID. I'm fairly certain that a lot of people got it, and never knew about it, but I'm the second one that tested positive. So we wanted to be careful, and so it's been tough. And there's familial, almost a familial bond, a personal bond that they have with you, that they feel like their son hasn't visited them, in a year, and so it's tough.
Well, you're so popular elected. I think you got 86%, so this is a community who
impressed.
knows you, right? And so I imagine that need to get out there and share with them.
Sure.
It's important to get that feedback. I'm curious, like we talk about some of the people that are on here, some of the students that are not from as dense, as some of these urban cities, are. Is density challenging for equality in some of these senses? Like, how do you make sure, that you're also having accessibility to opportunities, whether they're education, economy, higher ed? It's interesting. Some of there's challenges, I think, in dense populations, but also, how do you consider that density in a part of your planning?
I think density is a blessing and a curse, right? I think at times density can be something extremely powerful for the good, in terms of, you have more ideas, you have more people collaborating, generally speaking. You have the ability to grow. Often when you're dense, you oftentimes have the ability to grow denser, right? Like, I mean, in our case, we do. Like, New York has some density limitation issues. San Francisco does as well. Miami has the ability to grow basically 10x in density in our current zoning code, with no special cookies or exceptions or anything like that. So our densest areas have a tendency to get more dense. In terms of opportunity, it presents some challenges for cities that don't have, for example, mass transit that's comprehensive, and that have a struggling public school system. I think we have a wonderful public school system. I think we're one of the best in the country. We were actually won the Broad Prize a few years ago, which is the best public school in the country, prize for the best public school in the country. I also had superintendent of the year. So I do think we have a great school system. Can it be better? Of course. I mean, we always have to push ourselves to be better. Always.
Right. I'm sure there was lessons learned in this past year to understand how students learn what, accessibility is. So
No doubt. And I think the other thing you have to recognize, and this is something that's true for companies as it is for education, is that our world is more disruptive than it's ever been. Period.
yeah.
It's never been more disruptive, and it's the rate of disruption is only accelerating. So you have to adapt both. That's where the word resiliency comes from, right? You have to be able to adapt both to, changing educational needs and needs in business, and businesses need to adapt to survive.
Right. Right. Well, it's interesting. I'm encouraging people to ask questions as we go as well, because I know the mayor will want to hear from all of you. You won't be surprised. We have a lot of students on here. And one of the questions, Mayor, is from Artie. And Artie said, President Biden promised during his campaign to forgive $10,000 in student debt. You've got representatives like Elizabeth Warren and Senate Majority Leader Schumer pushing for $50,000 in student debt relief. Artie's question is, do you think student debt relief would help your constituents in Miami? I mean, do you have, it's certainly something that's more, it's a federal issue being
Sure.
discussed, but what impact could it have in your community?
Well, I mean, look, I think anytime that you're able to forgive debt, it's helpful, right? I mean, there's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
The question is, at what cost and who's paying for it? I mean, that's what happens. And I think, unfortunately, sometimes a lot of these conversations happen in a vacuum. I will say this, to me, education should be one of the most fundamental roles that government plays, in terms of making sure that every single child and student and young adult and adult, frankly, have an ability to have a premium education that's what's going to help us compete in a global economy. So I think we have we don't focus, in my humble opinion, I don't think governments generally focus enough attention and in some cases funding on making sure we have a premium education system. But definitely, student loan debt is something that, can cripple people for a lifetime, and it's very difficult to overcome. I went to 2 public schools, universities, I mean, graduate and undergraduate, and frankly, my sisters went to 2 private schools, and they both went to great schools. I mean, very, very close to American university. So, it's those are decisions that we all have to make on an individual basis, but they have ramifications in the future for sure.
Right. So this investment, in an interesting way, I mean, you've just launched a new initiative called Venture Miami. I'd love to give you the opportunity to talk a little bit more about that program and how you think it's helping the community there in Miami.
Well, the idea was that after the "How can I help" tweet, when I talked about helping make Miami the next Silicon Valley, I needed what I call the back end, right? I needed some support, and I was blessed to have the help of Saifi Shuf, who runs the Venture Miami office for me. He also works at my alma mater. He's the head of advancement for FIU. Now the University of Miami is dedicating somebody to the Venture Miami team. Soon we have someone from the Downtown Development Authority that's part of our team. We have someone from the city manager's office, who's the economic development director for the city, who's on our team. We have our first female venture capitalist in residence. We never had a venture capitalist in residence.
That's very new. I mean, I haven't heard of many other cities embracing that either, or doing that position.
No, and we think that women and minority founders get too little a percentage of venture capital as a percentage of the total and as a percentage of their representation in the population. So I think it was even more important for us for it to be a woman who understands how difficult it is to navigate the venture capital world. And so it's something that we're very excited about. Melissa Krinsman is an amazing, amazing person that we have. So we've created this stellar team to really roll out the red carpet and send a signal to the world that we want to be the place that all innovators and creators and builders come to.
Well, it's interesting as well, because I think one of the things that definitely attracts business, attracts the workforce, is amenities, right? And one of the great things about Miami as a city, it's the bars, it's the attractions, it's the arts. As we're seeing this, turn and people being vaccinated and this opening up, how important is it to make sure that these amenities, these things that are kind of like the identity of Miami too, are supported in that?
Well, Miami, and this is not a Miami thing either. I think all cities now are, and the world is becoming more experiential. If you think about it, it's all about experiences, whether they're dining experiences, whether they're cultural experience, whether they're sports experiences. That's what we're looking for. I mean, now you don't even have to buy anything that you need. Clothes, anything you need to shaving,
right.
Showering stuff, you can buy that all online. And so
right.
It takes away that entire experience. And so people have more time to do other things. And so I think that helps a city like Miami that has so many different experiences. And I think cities are going to have to understand that phenomenon, and they're going to have to develop their cities around the things that people want to do.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, and certainly I think the tourism is a huge part, for your city as well. So it's not only the community that lives there, but you welcomed, people to come and experience Miami as well. So I'm assuming that has been a huge impact, and you're looking forward to having visitors.
Absolutely. I mean, we're a city that has been traditionally tourist based in part, and I think the fact that we're now attracting the finance and the technology industry is a great way to differentiate our economy. You've seen the cruise ship industry that has been decimated, right, and has been shut down because of the pandemic. They still aren't completely sailing in Miami. That's thousands of jobs and tens of thousands of people whose lives are affected, whose oftentimes their only vacation is taking 1 or 2 cruise ships a year,
right.
Cruises a year. So it has a huge impact, and we have to differentiate our economy to make sure that we are able to deal with any kind of economic shock that can happen in the future.
Well, it's interesting because, as you know, we saw these multiple tracks running with the challenges to the economy. I mean, we've seen that we're all vulnerable with this global pandemic to health related issues. And so she had a question, you know, as far as you, as having served as mayor, what are some of the most critical problems for our healthcare system? You know, inequality, accessibility, affordability, and what could be the ways to alleviate those problems? You've certainly had to look at this for the citizens, you know, in Miami. What did you learn during the pandemic about the healthcare system and what we need to do?
You know, we've made yeoman efforts. We have one of the largest public hospitals in the world, or in the country. I think fourth largest public hospital in the country, Jackson Memorial Hospital, and we gave hundreds of millions of dollars of indigent care that will never be paid back. So I think having a strong public hospital system is critical. It's a safety net for your community. I think that's number one. I think the second thing is we are, you know, a state that by and large makes it very difficult. If you run up a big hospital bill, you know, it's very hard for a creditor to be able to attach anything that's your property or your wages if you're the head of the household. So there's a shield protection, right, for people who may not have insurance but have to get needed procedures. I think what happens is there are gaps, right, and I think the gaps are in people who maybe they don't need life-saving treatment at the moment, but they need treatment for cancer or for other kinds of ailments, and those untreated take you from a low risk profile to a very high risk profile. And I think that is something that we have to look at it. And there's a tremendous amount of inefficiencies in our medical system. I mean, there's so many inefficiencies. I mean, every day someone's creating a new company that essentially what it does is create efficiencies and reduce costs. And I mean, this is a multi-trillion-dollar industry that has enormous inefficiencies, enormous, some of the benefits are not lined up in terms of providers and what their incentives should be, their incentive structure. They're oftentimes incentivized to be inefficient, to charge more, as opposed to be efficient. And so the value system there is out of whack.
It's interesting because we've learned a lot about what some priorities of ours are, certainly health. One of the other things is a lot of us spent a lot more times in our homes than we ever have before, and the ability to have, a home. I guess one of the questions that we also have is, how is the city spending the federal CARES Act funds for affordable housing to protect vulnerable populations? I mean, that tie to home is so important. I think we learned a lot.
We should know more today, actually. Today,
really?
I'm in a council meeting as we speak, and I'm actually at home right now, but I'm not far away from the council, which is going to begin at 2. And we had a horrible incident in a neighboring city at Surfside that I'm sure many of you have seen on the news.
Yes, I certainly wanted to say, I know your colleague Mayor Burkert and the whole community, we reached out to your team this morning, and I know you're right there to see if there's help too. We're just devastated, I'm sure.
And as you can imagine, I'm getting a lot of calls both from the national media and from friends and family members who have family members that are in the building. So it's been difficult, and of course, coordinating with our first responders has been a challenge. So it's been a rough day, but we'll know more today because we have an item on the agenda that talks about how we plan to spend it. But certainly some of it is some of the stuff that we've already done, which is rental assistance, mortgage assistance, food, which we gave out food cards throughout the entire process. That was extremely helpful. And then things like trying to kickstart the small businesses in our community, making sure that they have the ability not to go under, because we have a very thriving and large small business ecosystem here. And then trying to create out of this ecosystem something different, right? And this is where the Venture Miami concept, hopefully will get funded today.
Right.
And what will happen is we'll have the ability to guide and fund seed and angel investing, pre Series A type investing, early stage investing to get companies kicked off. That's one of the hardest things for people to do is to scale and to go from, friends and family type of investments to a serious Series A investment.
Great. Well, we're going to be keeping in touch with your team to find out how it
Sure,
goes and share with the community. So
no
we'll keep
doubt.
everybody updated. We do have a question from Lauren, who's going to be an AU student in the fall, coming in as graduate student.
Congrats.
She thank you. She wanted to say you previously mentioned the increase in the use of social media
Yeah.
to connect government officials and their constituents. She wants to know, do you think that in the post-pandemic this will be an ongoing trend, and do you think this is a way of communications bringing younger voters, younger people into the fold, which is important. I'm sure as a part of your outreach, young members of your community, it's important to get them engaged.
Yes and yes. And my second yes is a hope more than a knowledge, because traditionally young people have been disengaged.
Mhm.
So it's really a hope. I tried to do some things when I was younger. I mean, I'm 43 now, still not very old for a big city mayor. I think my social media, I hope it reflects a very cutting edge and very transparent and almost vulnerable way of communicating, which is not typical of most public officials. And it took me a while to get there. Probably wasn't until after the How Can I Help tweet that I sort of kind of found my voice, if you will, when it comes
Yeah.
to social media. But it's definitely atypical. And I think, but I do think it's refreshing. And I think that people connect with it and feel a sense of bonding with me, even if they don't agree on some things. So I do think it will hopefully be something that happens more and more in the future, as people who do that get rewarded.
Absolutely. Well, I have to tell you that I'm going to give a quick shout out to Noah, who is in charge of our college Republicans on campus. When they knew you were coming, they said it was really inspiring to have a young Republican leader that we were talking to. So when you come back and visit us on campus, we'll connect you with Noah and the team. But I do think
I
it
would
was
love that.
important. They said they liked seeing somebody like yourself in public service and seeing the value of that. So I think, to Lauren's point, to Noah's point, you grew up in a family of public service. So it's interesting to me, do you still see the value in that? And how do we get young people to see the value in that?
It's critical. I mean, I do, and I wonder out loud if my father was not in public service, whether or not I would have gotten into it. I see so many people in my generation who have decided not to get involved for a lot of reasons that are understandable. The criticism, the unfair criticism, the nastiness on social media that they have to deal with, so many things. But our society depends, and like I said before, our government is big business. It's $1 billion company. Our county is an $8 billion, $9 billion entity. Our state is like 90 or 100 billion already. So, I mean, you're talking about $110 billion in annual purchasing power in 3 governments. So who you elect and their quality
Mhm.
is incredibly important to your quality of life
Yes.
and to decisions that impact you. And so, I thought very early on in my life, like I had 2 choices. I could either complain about government, um, or do something about it. And I think for me, it was a choice at about, I was 31 years old, 30 years old when I decided to run for office for the first time. And I barely got elected. I was elected by 262 votes my first time.
Slim
And I
majority.
often
Yeah,
say,
yeah.
I often say if 131 people would have changed their mind, we may not be having this conversation.
Right. It's true. Well, listen, Mayor, we want to be certainly respectful of your time. I know you have a 1 o'clock
Thank
appointment.
you.
I feel like we could talk for hours more.
Yes, we
From
could.
the Sine Institute and the Metropolitan Policy Center, we want to welcome you when you're in DC to come to campus and spend
We
some
love
more
that.
time with us. But I think all of us need a little bit. It's been a rough, hard, long, a little over a year now
Yeah.
for a lot of us. What are you hopeful about? Like, what keeps you going and in this public service? And what do you think? There's got to be opportunities that are coming out of this difficult year for everybody. So what are you hopeful about? Maybe you could
I'm,
shed some last thoughts on
I'll
that.
be honest with you. I'm hopeful about everything. I'm the kind of person that believes in hope and believes in positivity and believes that you get up in the morning and the most fundamental decision that you make, one of the most fundamental decisions that you make, is how you want to view the day, how you want to view the world, right? And you can look at it as the glass is half empty, or you can look at it as the glass is half full. And I choose to look at it as the glass is half full, something that I learned from my father. And to me, there's a tremendous amount of hope. I mean, this is the most incredible country in the world. This is a country where if you work hard and you study and you're innovative, you can do just about anything. A tremendous amount of opportunities are ahead of you. But it's also a country where if you get involved in public service, you can do something that is one of the most fulfilling jobs you'll ever do in your life, and you can impact the lives of many people in ways that is not compensatable. There's no compensation for it. It's no financial compensation will ever make you feel as good as it feels to help someone start a career, to help someone to get somebody into a great university like American through a letter of recommendation. There's just no better feeling than helping people and giving them a boost. And I think that's something that hopefully young people will understand and will participate in.
Well, I have to say to you, Mayor, this is so obvious why we wanted you to be a distinguished lecturer this year. You are incredible. We are looking forward to seeing your co-distinguished lecturer, Mayor Lori Lightfoot, speak in September. So I know that you two talk and collaborate. And again, I mean this from all of us. We welcome you on campus when you're here in DC. We're going to make sure our community stays in touch and sees what you're doing in Miami. And we're going to try and find ways to work together to find some of these policy solutions for the future. So we apologize to everybody about some of our technical difficulties.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that as well.
I think every minute we had with you was valuable. Again, thank you to your incredible team. There's a reason why Miami is thriving, and it's all of you. So thank you so much, and we look forward to staying in touch.
See you soon.
Okay, take care now. Thank you to everybody in the Sine community.